Welcome to Life Stories. What if the place meant to protect your unborn child became the place that tried to erase you? What if a single lie told in a quiet room behind a polished smile could shatter your dignity, your safety, and your sense of belonging? This isn't just a story about injustice. It's a story about a woman who walked into a clinic for care and walked out a catalyst for change. A story about silence, power, and the moment one voice refuses to be quiet any longer. Stay with us, because what happens behind closed doors will challenge everything you think you know about who gets to be seen and who gets to speak. Now, step inside the waiting room and listen closely. It was the kind of morning that almost fooled you into believing the world was kind. The early sun poured over the North Shore of Chicago, catching on manicured lawns and limestone facades, washing the sidewalks in gold. Joggers passed in Lululemon and linen. German shepherds trotted beside them, leashed to quiet husbands. Cafes steamed with espresso and casual laughter. It was the kind of morning that looked like privilege had bloomed and never withered. But inside the sleek glass of Havencrest Women's Wellness, a clinic more country club than medical center, the air was colder, calibrated, sterile in all the wrong ways. Maya Ellison stood outside its mirrored doors with one hand on her belly and the other curled loosely around the strap of her faded canvas tote. She was 6 months pregnant and alone. The kind of alone that isn't just about company, but presence, recognition. The kind of alone that made you visible in the worst way. She smoothed down her navy maternity dress. No frills, no brands, just clean lines and grace. Her skin, the shade of burnished mahogany, glowed under the morning sun. But through Havencrest's reflective glass, she watched a woman in a Chanel blazer clock her and immediately shift her purse to the opposite shoulder. Maya exhaled slowly, telling herself again that this wasn't about them. It was about the baby. Their baby. She murmured softly, "All right, little one, let's do this. Daddy's on his way." Julian had promised he'd be there. He always did. But duty had called. Something at the DOJ, one of those sudden fires he always put out with frightening efficiency. Still, this was their first 4D scan, the one where they'd see fingers and toes, maybe even a yawn. It wasn't supposed to be experienced alone. Inside, the reception desk gleamed like ivory under museum lighting. The young blonde behind it barely glanced up as Maya approached. "Good morning. Maya Ellison. I have a 10:30 with Dr. Vale." The receptionist looked up slowly, as if caught off guard by the sound of confidence in Maya's voice. She blinked, then tilted her head with something that wasn't quite confusion, closer to judgment. "You're here for Dr. Vale?" Maya smiled patiently. "Yes, confirmed just last night." The woman slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out." There was no warmth, no welcome, just the low hum of classical music and whispered assumptions. Maya sat near a potted orchid and began writing, her fingers steady until she noticed the woman across from her clutching her designer purse just a little tighter. A man, her husband, maybe, refused to meet Maya's eyes. It was subtle, polite, but poisonous. Behind her, the sound of stilettos clicked against marble. Somewhere, a baby laughed from a stroller. Life continued its smooth orbit. But inside Maya, the ache was rising, a taut thread between her ribcage and her child. When the nurse finally called her name, there was no smile, no eye contact, just a clipboard and a turn of the heel. Maya followed her down a corridor lined with smiling portraits, white mothers and their pale infants, frozen in moments of joy. None looked like her. She felt it like static under her skin. Room 4C. The door opened with a hiss. The nurse gestured wordlessly, then vanished. The room was clinical elegance. Lavender-scented antiseptic, crisp linens, a monitor blinking in the corner like a waiting eye. Maya perched on the edge of the exam table. Checked her phone. 10:41. Still no Julian. The door opened. Dr. Catherine Vale didn't enter the room. She possessed it. Tailored white coat, not a crease out of place. Hair like spun glass pulled into a severe bun. Lips the color of sanded coral. Eyes like polished chrome. She didn't smile. She didn't greet. She just stared. "So," she said at last, voice smooth as ice, "you're Maya Ellison?" "Yes," Maya replied evenly. "We're doing the 4D scan today." "You came alone," Maya nodded, resisting the urge to explain, to justify. "My husband is on his way." A smile twitched across Dr. Vale's mouth, insincere and cutting. Of course. She turned to the counter, adjusted papers that didn't need adjusting. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, colder, harder. Let me guess, she said without turning. You're not sure who the father is, or maybe he bailed this morning. Wouldn't be the first time. Maya's heart stopped. Excuse me? Dr. Vale turned, eyes sharp. This isn't a walk-in clinic, Miss Ellison. This facility is for women who plan for their futures, not for drop-ins who drift in from the train station. Maya stood, her breath shaking. I made this appointment. I confirmed it. I'm here respectfully. You people always are when you want something, the doctor hissed. Something snapped inside Maya, like a plate sliding off a counter in the dark. I'm leaving, she said, now. But Dr. Vale's smile had teeth. Not yet. She walked to the counter, eyes scanning. Where's my Cartier? I left it here this morning. Maya froze. Your what? My watch. Vale's gaze landed on her. It's missing. Before Maya could speak, the door opened again. This time, not with the antiseptic calm of healthcare, but the institutional thud of authority. 2 security guards entered. White, blank-faced, one already reaching for his clipboard. We've had a report, he said. You need to come with us. I haven't taken anything, Maya said, her voice cracking. I'm pregnant. Please, my husband. You can explain yourself downstairs. They took her phone. They led her through the back corridors. They sat her in a windowless room with a flickering light and no cameras. She was no longer a patient. She was a suspect. And all the while, somewhere above, the world continued sipping cappuccinos. But they didn't know about Julian. They didn't know who they were holding. They didn't know that at every tick of the clock was moving them closer, not just to reckoning, but to revelation. What would you do if everything about you was weaponized against you, except the truth? How far would you go to protect someone who's never had a voice in the room? Because when Julian Ellison walks through that door, justice won't knock. It'll break the lock. Julian Ellison stepped through the front doors of Havencrest like a man walking into his own courtroom. The click of his shoes echoed against the marble floor, sharp and intentional. His charcoal suit fit like armor, his DOJ badge a silent threat tucked just above his heart. He moved with the unshakable calm of someone used to watching systems buckle beneath his scrutiny. The receptionist looked up from her screen, smile already forming, but it died the second she met his eyes. I'm looking for Maya Ellison, Julian said, voice low, even, and devoid of patience. My wife. She had a 10:30 with Dr. Vale. Where is she? The pause was brief, but he caught it. The flicker of panic, the darting of her gaze, the too long hesitation. Sir, there's been an incident. I believe security was notified. He didn't wait, didn't blink. Take me there, or call someone who will. The badge came out, flashed just long enough to register wait. She stammered directions. Julian was already walking, down the corridor, past the staff elevators, past the point of politeness. He reached the door and pushed it open. And there she was, Maya. Sitting in a plastic chair under flickering light, hands cradling her belly like a shield. Her shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. 2 security guards flanked her, postured in the loose arrogance of those who believed they'd already won. But they hadn't planned for this man. They had no idea what they'd summoned. Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You will explain to me, in full, why my wife is being illegally detained, without due cause, without legal counsel, and without access to her personal property. The younger guard shifted, gum still in his cheek. Sir, we were just... I don't want excuses. I want footage. I want incident reports. I want the name of the person who authorized this and the time-stamped justification. Now. Maya looked up, her lips parting, something between relief and disbelief spilling from her eyes. He moved to her side, hand resting on her shoulder, the touch gentle but grounding. She closed her eyes, holding onto it like a lifeline. The guards exchanged glances. Authority cracked. The older one stammered. Look, we were following protocol. Dr. Vale reported. She lied, Julian snapped, stepping forward. You've made the mistake of confusing position with truth. Roll the footage. Let's see exactly what happened. They did. The video was a slow unraveling of their own case. Maya entering with grace, sitting quietly, never approaching the counter. Dr. Vale leaving, glancing at her wrist, manufacturing a crisis. Julian's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Zoom in. There. The Cartier watch, sitting on the tray, untouched, forgotten. And then something flickered across Julian's face. A hesitation, a crease of calculation at the corners of his eyes. He leaned in. Pause it. Go back 5 minutes. Camera 3. The janitorial corridor. The screen changed. A cleaning attendant passed through, eyes downcast. Behind her, a figure appeared briefly, half obscured by shadows and camera angle. A white coat, blonde bun, a flicker of movement near the nurse's station. Julian froze the frame. It wasn't Maya. It wasn't the attendant. It was Dr. Vale, alone, adjusting her watch and slipping something into her pocket. He turned slowly. His voice was no longer a threat. It was a verdict. You set her up. The room chilled. Maya's eyes narrowed. She wanted me out, she whispered, barely audible. From the moment I walked in, she needed me to be small, invisible, guilty. But now it was Julian who hesitated for the first time, because something deeper was clawing its way through the facts, a question more disturbing than the footage. Why? He asked softly. Why go that far? Why risk everything? The younger guard spoke, reluctantly. There was a donor coming in. Big name, press coverage. Dr. Vale was nervous, said she didn't want any disruptions, any distractions. Maya swallowed hard, the nausea returning, not from the baby, but from the word. Distractions. That's what she had been reduced to. A presence too visible, too uncontained, a womb wrapped in the wrong skin. Julian turned to the guards. Give me her phone. Now. This ends today. They handed it over. He returned it to Maya like a vow. But even as he guided her to her feet, something unsettled burned in her chest. A new ache, deeper than rage. It wasn't just about the humiliation or the false accusation. It was about what she had almost believed, that she didn't belong there. That maybe for a second she'd earned their suspicion simply by existing in a place built to exclude her. And in that second, something inside her cracked, then reformed. She straightened her back, lifted her chin. I want to see her, Maya said quietly. I want to look her in the eye. Julian didn't question it. When they walked back through Havencrest's corridors, it wasn't just the receptionist who turned to look. It was the nurses, the patients. The clinic director now called in by emergency phone call. Dr. Catherine Vale sat in a glass-walled boardroom, lips pursed, flanked by members of the clinic's ethics committee. She didn't rise when Maya entered. She didn't apologize. But Maya didn't need her to. She only needed her to listen. What happens when the person you trusted to protect you becomes the architect of your shame? Because Maya's voice is no longer trembling, and when she speaks next, the whole system will have to listen. Dr. Catherine Vale sat stiffly at the far end of the long conference table, arms folded, her pristine white coat unblemished, even as the cracks in her story began to show. Behind her were 2 members of Havencrest's ethics board, both visibly uneasy. Across from her sat Maya Ellison, no longer the vulnerable patient escorted through side doors and back hallways. Her posture was composed, chin held high, Julian seated beside her like a shield dressed in charcoal and steel. But today, Maya did not need protection. She had found her voice. The room was silent, the kind of silence that carries the weight of consequence. The board chair cleared his throat, glancing between the Ellisons and Dr. Vale. Mr. and Mrs. Ellison, we've reviewed the preliminary footage. We're aware of the discrepancies. Julian slid a folder across the glass table. Inside, you'll find timestamps, witness statements, and the full chain of events as documented by your own security team. Alongside it is our formal complaint, already filed with the Department of Justice. Dr. Vale scoffed under her breath. I did what I believed was necessary to preserve the integrity of this facility. Maya turned to her, her voice calm, but stripped of tolerance. You humiliated me, lied about me, called me a thief. And for what? So that the people who donate to this place wouldn't have to see someone like me in your waiting room? You didn't just try to protect an image, you erased a person, a mother, a teacher, a wife. Dr. Vale looked away, but Maya continued, voice firm, every word deliberate. I don't need your apology. I want your accountability. I want every Black woman who walks through these doors to know she won't be profiled, degraded, or dragged into a room and stripped of her dignity because she doesn't match your idea of belonging. The chair shifted in his seat, the weight of the moment pressing into his spine. We've placed Dr. Vale on immediate administrative leave, pending full investigation. A third-party audit of patient treatment records will begin next week. We will also be implementing a comprehensive bias training program across all staff, effective immediately. Julian gave a nod, but it was Maya who stood, slowly, her hands resting briefly on her belly. Change isn't measured by your press release. It's measured by what happens when no one is watching. That's where women like me vanish, and I'm done vanishing. She didn't wait for permission to leave. The meeting was over, and so was the illusion that Havencrest was untouchable. Outside, cameras waited. Reporters gathered like a second jury. But Maya walked past them with quiet command, Julian just behind her, hand resting on her back. Her baby kicked once, light, like a knock on the inside. A reminder that new life was still waiting to enter a world still learning how to make space for it. 1 week later, Maya stood behind a podium on the steps of Havencrest. This time, not as a patient, not as a victim, but as a voice. Flanked by local activists and community leaders, with Julian to her right and a crowd of supporters gathered beneath gray spring skies, she spoke, not with anger, but with truth that demanded to be heard. This story isn't rare. It's just rarely acknowledged. What happened to me happens to Black women in medical spaces, courtrooms, schools, airports, every day. We're told we're too loud or too quiet, too confident or too lost. We're assumed to be alone until proven otherwise, and sometimes not even then. But that ends today. Because this, she said, her hand touching her belly, is the next generation, and they will not inherit our silence. The applause wasn't raucous. It was firm, grounded, like a promise. Later that night, the house was quiet. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered. Maya stood in the doorway of the nursery. They hadn't finished painting it yet. Still just a soft blush of gray-blue on one wall, the faint scent of cedar from the crib Julian had assembled last month. She rested her hands on the frame, watching the light shift across the room. Julian entered behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, chin brushing her shoulder. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I keep thinking, if you hadn't come when you did, I would've," he whispered. "No matter what, no matter who tried to stop me." She turned to face him, her eyes shimmering with something too complex for one word. Relief, yes, but also grief. Not for what had happened, but for how easily it could have been worse. For how fragile safety still felt, even now. "I wasn't just afraid," she said. "I was ashamed. I started wondering if I looked guilty, if maybe I shouldn't have worn what I wore, or walked in alone, like I had to earn the right to be there." Julian shook his head. "You never have to earn what already belongs to you." Maya leaned into his chest, the rhythm of his heart slow and steady, the same heart that had walked into a clinic and demanded justice not with fury, but with facts, with presence. As they stood in the quiet room, a soft ping echoed from Julian's phone. He pulled it out, scanned the screen. "It's a message from the DOJ media office," he said. "They're releasing the footage, publicly." Maya exhaled. "Good," she said. "Let them see. Let them all see." That night, Maya wrote a letter to her daughter. She didn't know yet what her face would look like, or whose eyes she'd inherit, or what kind of world she'd step into. But Maya promised her one thing in ink. "You are not a threat. You are not a mistake. You are not someone's lesson. You are a light in the room, and no one will ever dim that light again." She folded the letter and tucked it into the top drawer of the nursery dresser, next to a tiny onesie that read, "Loved from the start." She smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a smile of endurance. Because surviving injustice is only the beginning. Changing it, that's legacy. How did this story make you feel? And what part stayed with you the most? Comment 100 if this story moved you. Where are you watching from today? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And thank you for watching Life Stories.